Hey guys, welcome back to another one of my videos. I am sitting here today. It's 95 degrees in LA. It's super hot, but I had to put on my witchy robe because it's September 1st. That's the start of spooky season for me. I actually get really hyped about it like 2 weeks prior to September. But we are ready for spooky season. You probably already know what I'm going to be making in this video, but in anticipation for the Rings of Power premiere, I will be making a Balrog. Real quick, I was delayed more than a few days. Episode 3 is probably already out by the time you're watching this, so yeah. Anybody who isn't a fan of Lord of the Rings probably already recognizes this guy. He's like the big demon-y looking figure that fights Gandalf on and off the bridge in Fellowship of the Ring. Basically, a Balrog is this really ancient spirit, aka a Maya, apologies if I am saying that wrong, who was essentially created to help shape the world. They came before Frodo, before Bilbo, before Galadriel, all the way to the time of the Year of the Trees. But I digress. What I'm trying to get at is that they are ancient, they are super powerful, and they will fuck your shit up. I also want to really quick mention Melkor, aka Morgoth. He's the one that pretty much corrupted the Balrog, and that's why the Balrog's like this evil entity that we know today. But yeah, Morgoth is like the OG baddie. Besides being super excited for the series to come out, this is kind of like my redemption song. I had made a Black Phillip cake, the goat from The Witch, previously, a couple of videos ago. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. It'll be in this link. I was really happy with how he turned out. A goat is a very tricky shape to nail down, I must say. But I was still disappointed with the horns of the goat. I used a mixture of like cake pop dough and fondant to sculpt them out, but the cake and the fondant just didn't want to hold its shape. I was really experimenting at that time, but yeah, structurally, I just wasn't a fan. I thought the ratio and the proportions were a little bit off. So I knew eventually I wanted to take another stab at making goat horn. And the Balrog essentially is mostly horns and very little head. This also gave me the opportunity to use a new material, and that's modeling chocolate. And I've seen a lot of people like on baking competition shows on like Discovery Plus and Food Network. They use it to sculpt out finer details and faces and things like that. And I've always really loved how it always turned out. So I was a little nervous about using this material for the first time, especially because I would be making it from scratch. But hey, I thought this was like a perfect opportunity. I have some projects coming up that are kind of tricky and really require holding its shape to look good. So this was my first run with using modeling chocolate. So today's video is a little different, right? Instead of using cake and fondant, I'll be using Rice Krispie treat and modeling chocolate to sculpt him out. So sit back and relax, and I hope you enjoy watching me fumble around for the first time with it. So make sure to like and subscribe. I think you're going to like this one, especially if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. As usual, I'm starting off with a sketch of the Balrog. I used a couple of reference pictures I found online. Surprisingly, most of them were from Pinterest. I'm terrible at basic anatomy, so this really helps me get a better idea of how the shapes actually work. I swear this is like the second most nerve-wracking part of any project. I probably didn't start sketching again until a few months ago, so it definitely takes some like inner pep talk. Even when I'm just drawing, horns are hard. It's such an organic yet super technical and finicky shape that I, for whatever reason, keep trying to recreate. But here he is, fully sketched out. Yeah, I was in love. Next step was the armature, or that wire figure that I would build off of. I bought actual armature wire this time instead of struggling with floral wire like I did for my Princess Mononoke boar sculpture. Make sure to click the link if you haven't seen it. It's actually one of my favorite projects ever. But yeah, this was way easier to work with and super easy to cut. Sometimes I just sit there and get hung up on how to make it look, but really looks aren't everything, especially when it comes to armature. You're going to cover up the whole thing anyways. You just have to really make sure that it has some stability. Then I started to make the materials. First up was making Rice Krispie treat. Full disclosure, my marshmallows were stale. Not expired though, just stale. I didn't store them properly. You'll see that when I try to mix it, how clumpy and sad it was. But lucky for me, Rice Krispie is only the inside part, so it doesn't have to look pretty either. Ugh, that struggle. Greasing your hands with veggie shortening and working with your hands is a lifesaver, especially in this scenario. I then began to slowly build up the shape just to give it some light bulk so it doesn't have to be pure chocolate. Next was making modeling chocolate. If you didn't know, modeling chocolate is made out of chocolate and corn syrup. That's it. Well, I use the term chocolate loosely. It's actually really candy melts. But hey, Michael's is having a sale. It's $1.99 a bag, so it's super cheap, and I happen to think they're still really tasty, and actually a little too tasty because I ate way too much of it. Into the microwave it goes, and then you mix the bad boy up with some warmed corn syrup. Mix, 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 and let it sit till it cools. So once it's all cooled, you can awkwardly chip it out of its bowl. Despite my struggle, I was actually so happy with how it came out. It feels just like fresh clay, albeit a little greasier. If it's too hard, usually kneading it a bit will help it become way more pliable and easy to work with. Now I began to build up the base layer of chocolate. Sure, I can go straight into details, but I've actually found that building up slowly layer by layer is a little more foolproof. It's easier to build up than aggressively have to cut away when sculpting when any mistakes happen. I just needed to get them a bit chocolatey first before getting to the demon bits. After the base layer, I then went in with some ridges and shapes. I know it looks funky now, but this also helps me kind of map out how I wanted him to look. It's a little dark, but you can see I even added in his tongue. This was actually a stand-in for the final thing you'll see later. So after all that quote-unquote mapping was done, I began to smooth everything out. You can see the difference in the horns between the before on the right and the after on the left. Because of my black Phillip cake, I think I was pretty eager to finish out the horns first. I just wanted to make sure that they were perfect. And once I was happy with the smoothing, I went in with all the little line details. So what I did was, I would lightly sketch out where I wanted each line, like major line, to be in segments, and then go in a little deeper with the tool after. This kind of helps me break up the horn so that the segments look even, and then I went in and did all the fine lines in each of those segments. I hope that makes sense. But yes, this took a while. Okay, next I made yellow and red modeling chocolate. The Balrog is flaming, so I had to get some fire detail in. I actually bought this pina colada candy melt for the yellow, and it was so delicious, but I think the sugar content in it kind of messed up the texture, at least compared to like the regular standard candy melts that I bought. So next time, unflavored is the way to go, unfortunately. I let those two modeling chocolate mixtures rest and began prepping the rest of his face. Sometimes I work in a very sporadic way, so apologies for jumping around a bit. I worked on his ears and bulked up around the sides a bit, and also started giving him more details in his face. So his upper lip is full of ridges that kind of align with where his teeth come out, and this was actually my favorite part of sculpting the Balrog. I felt like it really brings him to life, and I've never really sculpted a full-on like classic looking demon before, so this was very satisfying for me. Next up, I drew out his scales. To be honest, I was a little burnt out at this point, so I rushed a bit, but I was happy with the effect just the same. You'll see that I lightly scratched the scale details, but I did go in later with a thicker tool to really make the lines stand out. Okay, so now I started working in the fire details. Not sure if you noticed, but I pulled out his originally black tongue and decided that his entire mouth on the insides would be made out of fire and ember, or just give it that look. So I got the yellow modeling chocolate and just began to press it lightly into his mouth. I also made his eyes that same ember and would later give his nostrils that same effect. Here's where I fudged up a little. So I wanted him to have this giant crown of flames, and I was actually really excited to do it. But the more I worked on it and the more I added to it, the more like Guy Fieri he resembled. So I just decided to leave him bald, and I'm happy I did. It just means I'll have to seek redemption with another fire-based project in the future. Last detail was the teeth. So here's where I found one con of modeling chocolate. If you work with tiny details, you better work fast or else it'll turn goopy from the heat of your hands. So this was a little bit frustrating. Yeah, but here he is, all finished. To eat him, I had to kind of saw into him with a steak knife and unscrew his horn. So it looks really goofy, but it was really delicious. Kind of like a chocolate covered Rice Krispie treat. And it tasted way better than fondant. I hate fondant. And here's my little bean, who is always plotting. For what, I do not know. He's a little demon himself. And that was my Balrog. Verdict, I love modeling chocolate. I love how easy it was to work with. It really held its shape. It kept all the fine details in. Fondant really likes to like fight back while you're trying to put details in it, because it's more of like almost like you're trying to draw on like a sheet of marshmallow. And modeling chocolate has more of like a clay consistency, so I preferred it way more than I did fondant. Not to say that I will never work with fondant again. I think I just have a preferred material now. But yeah, definitely happy with how he turned out. I was excited to share with you guys. But most of all, honestly, I am so excited to start my next projects. I was kind of holding back because structurally they were very tricky, but now that I've kind of gotten down like armature and like how stable everything can be if you just have the right structure right, I'm pretty stoked. So please don't forget to like and subscribe. I would really like if you can join me on my next projects. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.